Some say love is forever, but sometimes like fleeting fame, and like what had at first appeared as endless romance will inevitably fade past the stage of mere infatuation. And when Bob and Susie had met in their freshman year in college, at a Boys and Girls Together college, it had been like a fairy tale romance. Love at first sight. Susie had been a sorority girl, while Bob had enrolled in the college's ROTC program, hoping upon graduation to begin life as a commissioned military officer, a hero and a leader, just as his father and his father's father had also been. From the very first moment they had met, both Bob and Susie had always dreamed of a June matrimonial ceremony. Flowers, summer dresses and all, immediately after their graduation. But that was until, from completely out of nowhere, the entire world had been turned upside down, and we had been hit with a virus that had spread unchecked. Denials for days, weeks, and then months that led to more months and more infections and more stress and more loneliness. They had reached what some might call a decision point. God, perhaps, was trying to tell him something. What should Bob and Susie do as reasonable persons? Unfortunately, in life, some events are rather quite out of our control. And on top of a global public health crisis, Bob's dad was a war-hardened soldier who had been most adamant in insisting that the show must go on, even in a pandemic. He had been prepared to attend, adorned in his full military regalia, and nobody, not even God, was going to rain on his parade, causing, of course, just a bit of consternation for the soon-to-be newlywed couple. How do you tell an old colonel and your father? Sometimes you just have to exercise a bit of common sense. And so, the June wedding was scheduled to march on forward as had been ordered. And guest lists of family, friends, and acquaintances had been compiled to pass on the invitation to plan to attend the nuptial ceremony for the bright young couple of students preparing to begin life together, living happily ever after as husband and wife, perhaps even raising a family as consenting and competent adults. However, still we might reasonably have a question. Given an unprecedented pandemic and evolving science, what should Bob and Susie do as prudent and rational persons? At least in the military. There are even military regulations to describe a methodical process to conduct deliberate planning for even the most common exercises. Even have a manual on how to twist your wrist 32 times to use a P32 to open any cap. And even without a field manual, one would presume that a reasonable person might first begin an analysis to prepare a reasonably calculated plan so as to prevent or mitigate risks, to first develop and distill a refined picture of the problem before inviting everyone to your wedding and possibly killing them in the process. And most unfortunately, about unprecedented public health crisis, there is not always sufficient reliable information upon which anyone can rely. What even some scientists might describe as a true phenomenon, or black swan event. And in exercising an abundance of caution, even one person conducting an exercise or transaction alone would be likely to be subjected to scrutiny by others and also be presumed to have assumed unto themselves the reasonably expected risks of their choices. That old devil consequences. Flog around and find out. However, when one includes others in this wanton and devil-be-damned affair, at least most courts of competent jurisdiction will assert that that person had engaged in reckless disregard for the safety and well-being of others. The textbook definition of criminal negligence. Just simple negligence is the failure to exercise the care of an ordinarily prudent person in the same or similar circumstances, while gross negligence is the utter disregard of prudence, as here, and a complete neglect of the safety of another that would shock fair-minded men. Even in the military, subordinates are expected to obey an order unless a person of ordinary sense and understanding would know it to be unlawful. And the general standard or duty is the duty of reasonable care. It is the duty to avoid negligent conduct. This is the general duty that is owed to those within reach of a defendant's conduct. You just don't want to be running around touching every hot stove you see. And so applying this rubric, if Bob and Susie cannot reasonably be expected to develop a risk management plan, if Bob's father doesn't even care about a reasonably calculated plan, lacking any credible or accurate information about the problem, one would then assign that whole category of considerations to what leadership professionals would describe as residual risks that had been unaddressed, associated with that activity, in this case, a matrimonial ceremony in June in a pandemic, throwing all caution to the wind and praying for the best. And at least in a court of competent jurisdiction, the rule articulated Riley that most law students learn in the University of Law School about strict liability. And the law in most American jurisdictions is that if a person brings or accumulates on his land anything which, if it should escape, may cause damage to his neighbor and others, he does so at his own peril. You broke it, you bought it. If it does escape and cause damage, he is responsible, however careful he may have even been, and whatever precautions he may have taken to prevent the damage. And ducking the bullet, most fortunately, however, for Bob and Susie, the June wedding went off without a hitch in a pandemic, and a good time was had by all. But you should always be aware that sometimes you just duck the bullets. Researchers call that survival bias. Just because you survived doesn't mean that you did something right. However, a bit of bad news had happened upon Bob's father a few months later. He had decided once again to be a cavalier hero, invisible to anything that God, heaven, or earth might decide to put upon him. And no reasonable person was in any way surprised when his I don't give a shit attitude had decided to take a shit on him, as well as many of his party guests, partying in a pandemic. And the moral of this story is, rather simply, sometimes shit just happens, and we may never know why. This message was approved by Major Mike Webb. Honest.
It's acquaintance. Always.